Welcome back to Boston Black News. We've had an interesting discussion this morning as relates to local politics, international politics, national politics. This morning, we had our partners at the Boston Globe Black News Hour. Special guest with Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Andrew Kimball, who is a candidate for Attorney General, Danielle Allen, who was a candidate who dropped out of the race for governor, Stephanie Garrard, who's an organizer, and of course, Globe reporters Megan Ines and Janae Osterholt, who were able to facilitate a discussion about black women. And my sister Zakiya Alake will be joining us to have more of a discussion. But I wanted to continue our discussion in reference to the international politics. Wali Bell out in Columbus, Ohio, our national correspondent, and Pastor Daniel Walker, one of the broadcasters here at Boston Praise Radio, and Detective Larry Ellison, broadcast from Mamleo. And we were having a discussion as it relates to Putin. Can he do it? Can he not? Is Russia strong enough? And I just wanted to dig down deep into that because that has been dominating the press. And I think it's important for us at Boston Black News, where our audience that can relate to us and talk to us and listen our thoughts, because we look at things from a different lens. So I just want to continue that. Wally, I know you're still on the line. I believe Pastor Daniel Walker may be still with us. If you're not, I know you may be still tuning in. So Wally, what is your thoughts? I mean, because I know you had said that he could, and Russia's stronger than when Pastor Walker had mentioned about, the comments that were made earlier.
Yeah. Again, you still have, and I'm not giving my personal thought here. Mm-hmm. This is, listening to not only our own Pentagon, our own military, but also independent military experts. Arguably, Russia is our either second or third strongest military power. Russia, for example, has actually more nuclear weapons than the United States.
Right.
And like I said, it has one of the largest and strongest armies, military, weapon systems. The whole, category by category, they're either second or third to China across the board.
Right.
So to underestimate them and say that this is Afghanistan or Venezuela, it's not. We're talking about a major military power.
Right.
And one of the main reasons why, like people were saying, why are you talking about this situation on a black show? But the main reason is whenever we have a major conflict, disproportionately, we have African Americans that are participating in that conflict.
Right.
And
I think folks forget that.
It's not a small matter if, we are considering going into a conflict or if it escalates. There is a real chance, and again, I'm using the experts, there's a real chance that Russia and Putin is considering escalating this beyond the Ukraine.
Right.
They are already looking at 2 or 3 additional countries, and right now, from what I've just recently saw, they actually started doing missile attacks less than 50 miles from Poland.
Right.
So we're talking, this could very easily escalate. They could very easily extend beyond the Ukraine and go into at least 2 or 3 other countries.
Well, I know one thing. When the president of Ukraine had spoke to Congress and other electeds, in the video clip that he had presented during his remarks and in his presentation, I couldn't even look at it, man. I mean, it was just so devastating to see folks get killed, babies, and And I mean, it was just so bad, you know.
They are saying, literally, and this is the United Nations is saying,
Right.
that there may be as many as 5 million people displaced
Wow.
by April. By April. Right now, we're already above 3 million people. And but they're saying that there may be as many as 5 million displaced. A lot of those folks are in Poland right now.
Right.
And what the rest of the EU is trying to do is to start to fan those folks out into other European countries. But this is putting a staggering toll on the humanitarian assistance. Imagine if I suddenly said, I'm going to bring 100 people to your house.
Right.
And Ron, you're going to have to feed them. You're going to have to clothe them. They're not coming with anything, and you're going to have to take care of them. They're going to need health care. They're going to need everything. Are you prepared for that, Ron? If I bring 100 people to your house?
100 people come to my house. But yeah, that's why I moved. I don't mean to joke about this, but I tell you, I moved. That's what's happening to a lot of these European countries that are accepting, Ukrainian refugees. Well, it's interesting you said, and I say that jokingly, but not jokingly because this is a serious matter, right? I remember when what was it in New Orleans when they had the floods? Was it New Orleans? Hurricane Katrina.
Yes, Katrina.
I was one of the lead organizers for our church. I was a deacon at the time at Greater Love Tabernacle, and we took in about 21 families. We found housing, resources, clothing, and so forth. And I remember the devastation that they experienced. There was one woman who her husband was a police officer, and he said, "Get in the car and go," right? Yeah. And she was 9 months pregnant. Okay, so I mean, I'm not going to say that I experienced it, but just to see that and experience that piece of it, it is devastating. So when you made that comment, that immediately came to my mind when Hurricane Katrina happened. But I do want to continue this conversation, but joining us is Sister Zakiya Alake, who's one of the organizers for Dunk the Vote, and we, it is Women's Month, and I wanted to make sure we get a perspective and a voice from a sister. This morning, as I mentioned, we were celebrating Black women with our partners at the Boston Globe during the Black News Hour, and we had our very electeds that were on, or those who had ran for particular office, but we also have some sisters that are major organizers that have been doing the work for years, including our sister Zakiya, and I kind of want to switch this conversation. We can go back to it, Brother Wali, and but I do want to hear that voice and hear from the lens of my sister here.
Brother.
All right, sister.
All right. Thank you so much for welcoming me to your listening audience again. And Brother Wali, we're going to tie this all together. Let me start by saying, confirming what my brother Ron just said. Yes, it is Black Women's History Month, and I would be remiss if I didn't also tell you today is the birthday of Representative Gloria.
I can barely hear her.
Okay. We're going to get it right.
Today is the birthday of Representative Gloria L. Fox, who retired from state government service as an elected official, about 8 years ago now, is it?
Yeah, it's been about that.
Yeah, and was succeeded by a sister named China Tyler.
Correct.
But from 1984 until then...
it was 30 years, right?
Maybe.
Yes.
But before that, Zakiya Alake is a graduate of the Gloria L. Fox and Georgette Leslie Johnson finishing school that took place at the Roxbury APAC.
Okay. That's way back.
I had to turn and look at Pastor Wall because Pastor Wall might be the only person in the room besides me that remembers.
I remember APAC.
All right, and let's remember what APAC stands for. It was Area Planning Action Council.
Okay.
And the APACs were autonomous but connected to ABCD, Action for Boston Community Development, the largest anti-poverty agency in New England. And what Gloria did was teach me how to serve the people.
Okay.
Gloria Fox never made more than $18,000 a year as an executive director of the Roxbury APAC. She did enjoy the free use of a car that every APAC had assigned to it, a vehicle. And she used it for what? To bring the people to the resources they needed.
Wow.
When people came into the APAC, she looked at me and said, Zaki, don't break any laws, but they're eligible for something before they leave here.
All right now.
And that to me was the defining characteristic. Make sure you give the people what they need. But in the evenings and on the weekends, she opened up the building so that we could have community meetings so that people could tell her what they needed.
Right.
And help organize around what they needed. And that was I came to the APAC at like age 23 or 4. I had been a statewide welfare rights organizer, going to school at Fitchburg State College, up there where I lived when I came back from D.C. Anyway, Gloria taught me how to serve people humbly, how to listen to them. And maybe people won't recognize that, but that was such a huge thing, because too often people were just told, here's your food commodities, step off from the line. She wanted to know if you knew how to use the food commodities.
Right.
She wanted to know, did your kid need a summer job? You never had to worry about Gloria putting her kids on the summer employment benefit program.
Right.
The teen program. She made her kids go get jobs in the private sector.
All right now.
She said those jobs were for the people.
Right.
Who didn't have access. She was very clear about that. So this morning I say, happy birthday, Gloria L. Fox. Job well done.
How is she doing? I haven't heard from her, seen her.
We're going to have her on soon, Ron.
Yeah.
You mentioned that to me months ago, and I'm remiss. I should have made sure that she was on for this morning, but we'll make up for that.
Yeah,
You know
definitely.
what we'll do? We'll find the birthday of a black woman who's important to her. Like, she taught me about Ida B. Wells and Fannie Lou Hamer. She made sure that Ida B. Wells' name and biography is in a time capsule that's buried in the South End, some project she was a part of her first or second year of office, right?
Right.
And that's how I learned about Ida B. Wells, because I surely didn't learn about her at Wachusett Regional High School in Holden, Massachusetts, out where I grew up.
Right.
You know, so let me be real clear about what Gloria taught me.
Right.
And then she taught me about Melnia Cass and about Doris Bunty, and
Ellen Jackson. Yeah.
and all these women here in Boston.
Yeah.
But she also, like me, she taught me how to support the brothers without ever losing sight of they all had mothers.
That's right.
So bringing it back around to Wali and to what you just said, can you imagine if we started organizing, and that's where the faith-based community is so important, bringing refugees from all the war-impacted countries.
Come on now.
You know, we got 200,000 listeners around the world on this very broadcast, thanks
Right.
to Pastor Wall and his work. Can you imagine if we were supporting all these war-torn countries?
Right.
But you were part of bringing people from Louisiana to Boston. At least they mostly spoke the same language.
That's right.
At least we could relate around some grits and shrimp.
We had actually sausage.
Oh, Lord.
Okay.
Well, that's true. That's
All right.
true. Oh, speaking of which, your lunch is ordered for your next meeting, by the way.
Oh, blessings.
That's from Richard Clater.
Okay, thank you. He had to get that in there. All right, you got to make sure because I am getting a little hungry right now.
We got you.
Okay,
We
good,
got you.
good.
And what are we talking about?
It's not lobster for Pastor Wall, by the way.
Oh, no.
Oh, he's mad now. Look at him. See, he's pouting.
Good. You know what, Wally, you were speaking about the refugees. Can you bring it back to that? Like, what could we do here in Black Boston? What could we do to aid refugees in all war-torn countries, probably including Nubian Square?
Well, I was going to say, see, we got to start. We better start here.
Charity at home.
We got to take care of folks here. Because, I mean, them 100 that came to my house, they know I'm no longer there.
Yeah.
Because Larry made a joke about it. He said, I seen your shades pulled down. Bro, I don't live there anymore.
I got paid yesterday. My grandchildren, the older grandchildren,
Right.
they know.
Right.
They already know.
They already know.
They're already
Oh, they can
tested.
smell it. My son came by yesterday. He was like, "Yo, Dad, what's up?
Yeah,
Just
see?
checking on you."
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
okay. I don't mess up the neighborhood. But anyway, so Wally, so what so yeah, she didn't went there on us. So I went back all the way back to the Boston Black News Hour. Well, Black News Hour for the Boston Globe, and the sisters were talking about. Every one of them talked about their mom. And I mean, and when you had mentioned, which kind of just struck, for me, my mom, her birthday was this past Tuesday, March 15th.
All right.
Who was one of the founders of Roxbury Tents of Harvard, where her and her neighbors fought Harvard back in the 70s for affordable housing. That's why we have Mission Park and the housing around it. And it was a 99-year lease, but they own it now. Mission Park owns it. Yes. So moms are so important. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Zakiya. You know, we have the Black Male Committee that's been organizing to get brothers involved in the Black Male Commission. And one of the things, and you've attended some of the meetings.
I'm going to be at one today.
You're going to be at one today, right? And we're going to have our grits and what else are you going to order? I know the sandwiches or something, right? But it's important that we acknowledge each other, the gender, the black male, the black woman, the black child, the black family, right? And what has happened is that historically there's been reasons why the black male is in the condition that he is. And folks don't know this, right? There's many reasons. And one of the things I don't want to happen that we lose sight of, we need each other. And that's so important.
Thank you, Ron. I want to tell you that just last night, I began to serve as a facilitator for the Nurturing Fathers program.
Okay.
Now, the Nurturing Fathers program comes out of the Family Nurturing Center. Director of Programs, our beloved Richard Clater. But what I said in my opening to the brothers, I'm one of 4 facilitators. I am the only female, and I said it was an honor and a privilege to be there with them, and that through the nurturing program that I took back in the 90s, I learned to tell my sons to stop giving me Father's Day cards. See, my sons used to honor me by giving me Mother's Day and Father's Day because due to unfortunate circumstances, their parents, me and my husband, had broken up when they were toddlers.
Right.
And had never been in their lives since then.
Right.
So they honored me when they got old enough by giving me Father's Day cards too, and many women in my age group accepted that. But I learned through the Family Nurturing Center to honor the fact that it would be better to say, I don't have a father in my life than to tell your mother she's your father too.
Wow.
Now, it makes sense. Children don't know any better, but grown-ups don't always know better either.
That's right.
And so through the Family Nurturing Center and through this new program, Wally, new to me, the Nurturing Fathers program, I am learning how to honor better the contributions of fathers.
Right.
And the need. There's a thing in psychology called father hunger. That children experience when the father is absent from the home.
Right.
Father hunger is a real thing. So being able to work with this group of men, there's like 10 or 12 in the group. We started yesterday, every Thursday for the next 13 weeks on Zoom, unfortunately, but that's the pandemic, right?
Right.
Helping them discover their strengths as fathers, their ability to cry if they need to be emotional. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Wally?
There have been a number of studies over many years talking about what a male brings to a household. And it's beyond just the discipline and the masculinity. There is, I'm going into Asian philosophy. There's that balance, that yin-yang. And there is a magical balance that's achieved when the household has both the male and the female.
Right.
And the male has a place. I love women. I know what women bring to the table. They do an incredible job of not only playing their role as women, but also, like she had mentioned, playing the role of men as well. But, playing the role and substituting that role is completely different than someone actually being that role.
Right.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I just this is like close to me because I interact with a lot of brothers, and particularly those who have been somewhat successful in their careers. But at the same time, there's been a trend with black sons. Okay, black sons dealing with trauma, and and it's interesting. Some of my friends include pastors, politicians, folks who are in corporate America that are doing okay, but their sons are not. Right? They're struggling with many issues, many challenges. And so I was talking to an individual about what I've observed in reference to how I've noticed a lot of the sons are either getting in trouble, they're, with law enforcement, whether they're dealing with drugs, alcohol, or anything like that. And I made a comment about intergenerational trauma that has been passed on. And like I look at even myself, and I'll put myself out there. I know there are things that I've dealt with in my life that I've learned to cope, but maybe not been treated.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, we develop our own coping mechanisms.
Right. Like I know I can pray myself through, walk my butt off, exercise, this, that, whatever. A lot of our children don't know these different things. They know social media. They know how to use the phone, the iPad, this, that, whatever. But they don't know like the basic coping skills. So therefore they end up in a position of chaos.
They don't have. Exactly. I'm sorry, Wally. You go ahead. I'll come in later.
Oh,
because y'all gonna help me with this one because I need it.
No, number one, I agree, especially when you talk about intergenerational trauma and intergenerational issues that go back, literally 5-6 generations. And we had talked about, for example, last hour, the economic impact. These changes in net worth, for example, they're not just numbers. Those are impacts that affect families and how families react.
Right.
Can a person be able to go to school? Can a person, does a person have to have a job? I know people who literally, in my life, that in high school, they had to work because they were bringing money in to their family to keep the lights on. And imagine that when you're in middle school or junior high, back in the old days, and high school, and you're working to keep the lights on. You're working to help pay the rent, not just because you're trying to maybe get a car or it's your first job. You're doing it because you have to do it. And both Ron, I know you and I, as well as your wonderful guest, we know people like that.
Right.
And the trauma that is developed from all that's hardcore.
Right.
And it's going to take a while for us to address that and be able to survive that and thrive from it.
Does that
take a while?
Does that trace back from slavery?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I've actually studied books, one written right here in Boston by the brothers who founded the first black-owned mental health agency, Pyramid Builders. They wrote a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Disorder for their PhD thesis. And so we studied it, and that's a nice segue for me to talk some more about mental health issues. Mental health issues and one of its, you could say, subsets, I suppose, addiction, which, as you guys know, I'm a certified addiction counselor. I'm also a woman in very long-term recovery, 32 years last Thursday. One of the things I want to say about both, about both issues is that we learn how to repair the trauma such that you it's not just about coping with it. That's a term we all seem to use.
Yeah.
But how about we can do some things over a period of time, not overnight, but over time, so that the trauma is minimized. And we're still working on it, but its impact is minimized over a period of time. And go ahead.
Can I say this just really fast too?
Yes.
And I completely agree with everything you're saying. We also have to, as a black community, embrace mental health
Yes, we
and
do.
wellness and the ability to be treated, because there's a big stigma. We talked about it last hour as well. There's a big stigma with in the black community of getting help, getting assistance for mental issues, and even I'll even go on and saying physical issues.
We should
And for
talk
good
some
reason,
about
we've
normalizing
had
that.
discrimination. We've had issues with the health system, but we also have to just also trust and move forward from that.
Right.
So
We have a role
I'm
to
sorry
play
to
in
interrupt
that.
her, but I definitely wanted to throw that in.
No.
That's important.
Let me just say this, because I'm sitting here and watching. I don't know if I met you way back when my early years at Mission Hill Community Centers, and when they had the Casey Foundation.
Yeah, you
which
did.
was
We did.
We did.
But you
Okay.
were very busy supervising 80-plus people
Right.
and raising millions of dollars. You might not remember me, but yeah, we did.
Yeah, and I remember when they were introducing it, even myself at my young age as a director, when they started mentioning mental health, I was like, oh.
Yeah, because we've been taught that we're not supposed. It's so opposite, isn't it, Wally?
Yeah.
We talk
Yeah,
about
it is.
crazy Uncle Arthur or Frank or somebody or Auntie Katie in the closet, just crazy as they can be, or upstairs kept away in the attic. We laugh about it.
Right.
Right? And then when it's time to come to a community meeting, or we're in church or somewhere, and you get to hear maybe a guest mental health expert talk about it, we're really not prepared to embrace it because we've busy making fun of crazy Aunt Catherine. I know
Right.
that's how I grew up.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so once you start making fun of somebody, it's hard to then embrace in yourself or in somebody else that they too have mental health issues. I have a saying that I thought I got from Malcolm X, but I can't find it when I've Googled it. It goes like this: you can't live in the outhouse without stinking. So if we're living in a crazy, insane society, and maybe, my language needs to change because crazy is not acceptable.
Right. I was going to say that.
Yeah.
'Cause I used to say
It's
that.
an unhealthy world that we live in.
Right.
Here we are talking about bombing and this and that in the Ukraine, while right next to us are hungry children. Wally, in Boston, we still don't have libraries in some schools.
Wow.
Let me let that sink in for a second, because it's been in my mind for like 3 or 4 weeks since I read it in the newspaper. But yet, as powerful as I am, I haven't done anything about it.
Wow.
You know?
I want to say this, and you hit it right on the head. One of the biggest problems with this is every issue that you want to raise, the black community disproportionately gets affected. It has been disproportionately affected by COVID in terms of unemployment, homelessness, death, illness. This war that we're possibly getting into at some point will disproportionately have African Americans fighting in it. I can go on and on and on. And with that, you have to understand that we have to have coping mechanisms. We have to have help. And to sit there and, like we all have said, to make fun of it, to make light of it, to minimize it in the black community is the wrong thing to do at this point. I believe that a lot of our popular culture, our music, and our television needs to do a lot better with saying it's all right to have mental illness. It's all right to get help and to solve your problems.
And
so all these things, need to come in.
Well,
and
you're so right.
To be able to move forward. But we have to move forward. Because we experience it the same way, if not worse, than the general population.
Here's our challenge, and we can do this. We're up to this. I can work with Ron, we can work with you, we can work with everybody in the studio right now to come up with a plan where, how you have PSAs, public service announcements?
Yeah. Something
like that where every day we're saying, okay, a little bit of exercise, a little bit of vitamin D, and here's something to help you think well of yourself for today, or something that
uplifting.
I know how to do it. I just need some help to do it. Something that's uplifting. We're sitting in the middle of a faith community,
right?
So we might, how do old people say it? Cut your garment according to your cloth.
Okay.
So if the cloth is a faith-based cloth, then we cut it that way. If it's a secular cloth, like I tend to come from, I won't say the H word. Mommy, I'm in church again. It's Friday. I'm sitting in a church. But that we say, I have women that I nurture as a recovering addict, right? And every day we say to each other, I am whole, I am perfect, I am complete. There is nothing wrong with me. There never ever was, and there never ever will be. Now, that's not to say that Sister Zakiya's behavior is not out of order every day. It speaks to my essence.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with my essence, because either I was created by
the oil,
a divine intervention in the image, the spirit. Oh, what is happening to me? Or I wasn't.
Touch the Lord.
Wally, they got me. I knew they were going to get me.
We got Boston Praise Radio over there. We got Boston Black News.
They got me. But
pass over there praying.
but
save the Lord.
On air. It's all right.
It's all right. you got the Holy Ghost. The elderly are dancing. Oh, hallelujah.
And I ain't going to say but, because somebody told me that's a rebuttal. However, if I was created in that image, there can't be anything wrong with me.
Right.
And don't let anybody tell you any differently, because the world is going to tell me there's something wrong with you, Zakiya, that can't be fixed.
Right.
Why don't you have some chocolate cake, since you don't allow yourself any rum? Why don't you have some chocolate cake? You'll feel better.
Right.
Why don't you call that man that don't really mean you no good? Why don't you call him?
Right.
That's what the world will tell me in my head.
Yeah.
So if we start talking honestly about these things, that everybody gets tempted to do something that's not healthy, to fix or cope with the long-lasting trauma.
Yes.
If we did that every day, I think it would be enough.
Well, one thing I've learned just now, because I use that term, coping.
Yeah, we do.
Because we cope, right? But the term that you use that I think can help me and others that are in roles of leadership and support, repairment.
It's repair.
It's repairment, because we've been damaged, bruised.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
You can't help it if you live here.
Right.
If you live here, imagine being from one of those war-torn African countries.
Somali. Wow.
Yemen. Wally, where's Yemen again? Yemen's in Africa, is it?
Yemen. Google it.
Not Yemen. Yemen.
Yeah, man.
I just read the 700.
African country.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Do we know how many little children under the age of 5 have been killed by famine?
Right.
Caused by bombing over the last 7 years. I've just read about it recently, and it broke my heart.
And you don't even hear about it.
You don't hear about that.
That's a whole
I
nother
read
issue.
a whole lot of those leftist journals, and I read about these things. Imagine being in this country hearing about, the Ukrainians, you children have just suffered. Well, what about my suffering? My cousin is over in Somalia somewhere. Can't eat.
Exactly.
Can't go to school.
Excuse me for interrupting. I do want to say this, and there has been talk about this, that I'm not taking anything away from the refugees in Ukraine.
No.
But you brought up a very good issue that there have been conflicts in African countries and conflicts that have involved minorities that have received no media attention on, no focus on. And a lot of the attention that is happening now with the Ukraine is because we're dealing with majority populations and folks that can relate to those populations. You know, they look like the same soccer moms that are here in the United States.
I read that in the Guardian. I read politicians saying things in the United Kingdom like, they're our blood. They're our blood. They're blonde and blue-eyed.
Puffy vest, and they got on the same designer jeans, and, they have the same look as the suburban mom next door. So it's going to, easy to show and get support for this and keep it. But if it's somebody else, and I'll even use Afghanistan, that just happened just recently, or we can go even south of the border where we're at Mexico, and we have people literally as we speak at the border, and just because they're people of color, they're not getting any attention. And
is that in Ukraine? No, let me check. No, I don't know.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
This is what okay. Now we're Boston Black News. Can we keep it real, right?
Yeah, that's right.
This is what has been told to me, so I'm not going to say it's factual.
It is factual.
Okay, there were black folks in the Ukraine that were being denied to get away from Ukraine.
Yeah, it's documented.
It's documented. Wow.
Yeah, in fact, the United Nations. The main leadership of the United Nations actually decried it. It started an investigation of it, and they're working, even to this day, working with the Ukraine government, and not only the Ukraine government, but also Poland and Hungary and a lot of the other countries to make sure that there's no discrimination as they're accepting these refugees.
Wow.
So even in war, you have discrimination. And this is not something that's new. This has always been. There's always been discrimination in war. Black troops, I remember my dad even telling me, who was in the Army, were refused to go over to Europe because there was a fear of black men being trained to shoot European men, white European men.
My father was in the Second World War. He reported the same kinds of things.
Exactly. Now, the first war where you actually saw a lot of black soldiers actually on the ground was actually the Korean War.
Yes, because remember the Army was segregated up until the end of World War II.
Yeah. My dad was actually what they call the jitterbug. That was that group of military folks in the Army that were between World War II and the Korean War. And they literally flooded Korea with a lot of African-American soldiers.
Wow.
And they were slaughtered at the beginning of the Korean War. Slaughtered.
So, Wally, sorry.
But again, like I said, you're dealing with African-American soldiers going into Asian country, another, country of color, not a European country.
Here's something I found online from France24.com, which is a French mainstream television news show. The title is "Pushed Back Because We're Black." We got to remember that slogan.
Yeah.
Africans stranded at Ukraine-Poland border. And this is from February 28th of this year. Nigeria and South Africa have expressed alarm at reports their nationals are being stopped from leaving war-torn Ukraine. At Lviv train station in western Ukraine, France 24 met several African students who say they were pushed back at the Media border crossing with Poland.
Wow.
And our friend, our shared friend, Horace Small called me to tell me about a Nigerian woman that he's being asked to assist. She was in college in the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And she married a Ukrainian citizen, I think, and somebody in his family called him because she's related now by marriage to his family. And she's stuck. She's not being given refugee status. Now, that's about 2 weeks ago. But Horace will be here in Boston again this weekend, and I'll ask him about it. But
today?
Yeah, today.
He's coming in today?
Yep.
Yeah. He called me from France. I know, right? So we have some comments on social media that Pastor Hobbs could read for us. Could you share some of them?
Sure. So Eric Kennedy says, Western Asia, where is Yemen? Yemen is a country in Western Asia located on the southern end of the Arabian Peninsula. It's bordered on two sides by water, the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, and by Saudi Arabia. To the north and Oman to the east, it is the poorest country in the Middle East.
Wow. Thank you, Brother Eric. Any other comments? Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, we got our answer. So this discussion is so needed, and this is where we're going to use this platform for all of our listeners, viewers that are out there, so that we can learn together and teach one another. I think it's so important as it relates to international, national, and local politics. I know that in theory we talk politics are local. Yes, we know that, but now it's become so international because it's affecting all of us. So just keep that in mind. And I do want to continue to push the vote. I had mentioned this in a couple of broadcasts, and I'm still a little shocked at this. And it's the statistic of Boston being the lowest turnout. Actually, no, not Boston. It's Boston. I got to figure it's Boston or Massachusetts. I got to get this from Paul Simmons. The lowest turnout of blacks, voter turnout in the country. In the country, yeah. So it's Massachusetts. It must be Massachusetts. It must be. I got to find out. It's either Massachusetts or Boston. And in the comparison of our work with Dunk the Vote, we did well, but that's just a small portion of the work and how we have, we go from nonpartisan to partisan for certain issues and candidates. But that is so important, and it all is interconnected to what we're talking about today. Exactly. So I just want. Yep, and I just go ahead.
Can I say one thing really fast?
Yep.
You brought up a great point. And I will. And you've heard me say this many times. The black community cannot take their vote for granted.
Right.
They can't sit and say, "Well, I don't know if I'll vote this time. I don't need to vote this time." You have to vote every time.
Right.
Because depending on where you are in the United States, your lack of voting is helping the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Your lack of voting can actually jeopardize your future ability to vote in some states, including here in Ohio.
Right.
You can actually be thrown off the voter rolls in Ohio for not voting.
Right. Right.
And you have to re-register and prove yourself and that sort of thing. So do not use this. It's a privilege to be able to vote. Use your privilege.
Right.
Because it can very easily be taken away. There's efforts to do that.
Major efforts.
In
Okay.
fact, we haven't checked on the Black Eagle. Wally, remember we spoke about him, I did anyway, a few months ago, that he went on a hunger strike. No solid food. I didn't check, and that's my job every Friday when I'm on, when I am on, to check and let y'all know. The last time we checked, he was on day 67 of a hunger strike because the Voting Rights Act had not been passed in Congress. But let me tell you, bringing it back home, on a initiative that Ron Bell assigned me to this summer, I had to help gather up residents of one of our public housing developments. What was it? Franklin Field.
Franklin Field, right.
And it was a Friday night of Labor Day weekend. We met in a teen center. It was 6, I think, Latina leaders of their housing development, their public housing development, and their staff, one of their staff people. And one of the Latina women looked at me, she said, Zakiya, you notice anything funny about being in this teen center?
Right.
I was so silly. I said, the food hasn't arrived yet that I ordered? She said, no, there's no teens here.
Wow.
It was 6 p.m. I said, yes, sister, you're right. Where are your teens? She said, we can't let them out when it comes to nighttime because the drug dealers take over. And every one of those women recounted a story of being physically next to someone who'd been shot and killed or seriously injured. And the staff person talked about the trauma of driving the same beaten up van to take the kids on a movie trip that had been shot at while 10, 15 kids are trying to pile in the van. Somebody came like 7 years ago and shot up the van trying to shoot the kids, right? And the Boston Housing Authority didn't repair the van for years.
Wow.
We talk about being traumatized in other countries.
Right about here.
That's Dorchester,
right,
where we're sitting.
You know, and we touched on this, and I want to bring this back up in reference to, like, even what's going on in Ukraine, foreign countries, this, that, whatever. It's hard when you're in it locally to even acknowledge that.
Yes.
Because you're like in this pain, comparing pain. And I actually struggle with that personally. I mean, I know better, but still, I'm like, how can I walk over my brother and sister right here in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, every other city in town that black people reside, and pay attention to what's going on internationally?
And thank you that we have some good examples of doing that, because it is hard.
It is hard.
I did see one of those women last Saturday. I was at a press conference Ayanna Presley called for that gig workers ballot question.
That's a whole nother topic.
I didn't want to bring it up.
No, but you got me triggered.
But one of those women, she ran up to me, Zakiya, do you remember me? From the conversation we did for Dunk the Vote? I said, yeah, Real Talk for Change, sure. I said, how's the teen center? She said, girl, we got it back.
That's awesome.
So I said, well, I'll bring Ron Bell up very soon so we can do a follow-up, because what they told me was they were going to vote, but they weren't happy about it because they said once these people get in office, they never do anything for our public housing development, Franklin Field.
Wow.
So I promised them that we would stay in touch. Now, that was November, so I've got to get up there, and we've got to figure out what do they need and how do we get it for them.
Yeah.
Not get it for them, but bring the elected and appointed officials so they can get it for themselves.
Right. Well, you know, it has been a trend, and particularly during the pandemic, folks hiding.
Yeah.
Our electeds are hiding. Some of our they don't know, and that's when we had the and it's going to be coming up very soon in Milton to Mattapan. We had the George Floyd March, right? And one of the things that we did, you wasn't working for Dunk the Vote at that time, right? It was in May of last year, was to introduce our elected officials to the community.
Oh my.
Because some of them, just think about it, and I'm going to give them a break on this one, okay? Some of them that were elected in 2000 came in during the pandemic, or or 2019, and then they were sworn in 2020.
2020.
Right, 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, who's he calling elderly?
Oh, don't do that. Don't say that, because he gonna get me.
Well, he didn't see me trying to hear Wally by putting my ear on the microphone earlier.
Right.
I put my ear on the microphone. I might as well tell it, because that young boy, Pastor Hobbs, is going to tell it, but I did. I put my ear on the microphone to try to hear Brother Wally.
Oh, God.
Pastor Wall's laughing at me. You better be laughing with me.
That would have lost my thought.
No, I'll help you, as old as I am. The people hadn't met their elected officials because they got sworn in during COVID.
And so they had masks on. And so even me, right? Then when they had I was like, who's that? I didn't recognize our elected officials, some of the new ones.
Yes.
You know, and to be quite frank, and I'm embarrassed to say this, don't even know all our new city councilors. Do you, Pastor Hobbs?
Not all of them.
Do you?
No.
See,
I don't even know one named Kinsey Buck. They've been there for about 8-9 years.
You didn't even know her?
No, I don't know her yet.
And then the sister who just got sworn in for Matt O'Malley's role in West Roxbury?
Kendra Hicks.
Not anymore. Her name is Kendra Lara. That is...
Wow.
She changed her, I guess, her maiden name maybe, or something. And I was like, who is Lara? Kendra Lara. So it was Kendra Hicks.
Okay.
But when she got in, she changed it. I don't know if she got married or went back to maiden name, whatever, but that's confusing, right? Sure. And so even in I think there's a special election coming up with Lydia Edwards.
Yes.
Right. Yep. So that's going to be another.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so it's some action going on statewide. You know, we had Andrew Campbell, who was on earlier, running for Attorney General, who has over, I believe, 50 plus endorsements. She does. Folks statewide. So she's doing the work.
Now, Ron, have we ever had a black person run for Attorney General before?
No. I don't know.
I don't remember.
Or Secretary of State?
Tanisha Sullivan is running for Secretary of State.
So we've got some educating to do.
Yeah, and we have to show some of them that we're here too.
And Wally,
I talked to Tanisha. She didn't know we were located here at 670 Washington Street.
Oh my!
I said, I said, well, because she was going to come on, but her schedule couldn't allow her to. But she was like, "Where are you located?" I said, "Boston Black News." You don't know 671. So maybe we have to do more advertising or. You know.
Well, thanks to you all. Here's a nice segue, Wally. Back on December 18th, Ron had newly elected city councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson, who happens to be my city councilor for where I live, but she's also the city councilor where my beloved Addiction Recovery Center is located. We're called Metro Boston Alive. We run the Marcus Garvey Center. He had Gregory Davis, our volunteer executive director, and a family member to Pastor Wall on. So we did some fundraising for them, right? For us. Well, Tanya Anderson just got us 2 $5,000 donation checks. One of them was for me to build an online recovery community.
Awesome.
I'm so excited. And the other was for the ongoing $1,200 a month in utility bills that the Metro Boston Alive runs up.
Right.
So because of that, we now have the money to come out and do health fairs once a month. I'm not going to try to say we can do it more than once a month.
Right.
But we can do health fairs that also have voter education and registration and Dunk the Vote Forever pledges. Why education? We don't even seem to know why we have to sign those things, so the signatures, so people can get on the ballot, Ron.
Right.
But not only do we not know about it, we don't know that it's not a marriage.
Right.
If Ron Bell says, can you sign this, it doesn't mean I have to vote for you.
Right.
But we have to educate people around that. Can you talk a little bit about that before it's time to go?
Well, we're going to have to go because right now it's time to go. We're going to continue this conversation next Friday. We had so much. Thank you, Wali, for reporting out from Columbus, Ohio. My sister, Zakiya, Alake, Pastor Wall, Pastor Hobbs. We want to thank our listeners out there. My name's Ron Bell. We are going to continue our conversation next Friday at 8 a.m. We're going to be talking about voting once again. current affairs, locally, nationally, internationally, here at Boston Black News. See you next time. God bless you. Y'all this right. When I first got out the hospital, Thaddeus, Wali, who's my cousin, by the way, in Columbus. When I first got out the hospital, I just need to do something. I was in the hospital for 4 weeks.
All right.
Wow.
And I'll also add to that, we have to get off competing with